Otherwise, she would be here. Similar, this was the first time I've seen it, and I think it's on the right track. The only thing I would offer out there, and I think this is where the complexities of KM start to come in, is, are any of you familiar with the Baldrige criteria?
Yes.
Yes.
Using that as a framework, I want to talk from for a second. I think one of the things that generally we miss is the impact of pushing a domino here, what happens down the line. And I don't think generally we've done a good job of understanding the impacts an action taken over here has on some other area of the organization. And just by way of example, I've worked in organizations where they want to do something around knowledge objects. And so we start to build something with that, not realizing that has an impact on an individual development plan, not realizing there's an outcome for succession planning, not realizing you've just impacted the learning management system, not realizing you haven't liaised with HR and all of their systems. And so there is a systems approach to this, and while at the knowledge, not just the knowledge worker, but the knowledge team member level, they may not necessarily have to understand those impacts, but they have to have the awareness that Douglas is talking about, that what they do can have a profound effect, and is simply not allowed to work in a vacuum. They have to have this general understanding, and it's even more critical at when you get into the executive management level, because there's so many other aspects that traditionally we haven't thought of in the past as being KM, like a profit and loss statement. Aligning your KM to the organization's strategic objectives, and understanding that no matter how much we might want to push something as a KM person, if it doesn't align or support the strategic objective, you're wasting your time, you're wasting resources, and you may have to let that go. So I think encompassing from the bottom up, or if you will, the top down, however we approach this, at the levels of KM responsibility in an organization, it is much more profound. And then I echo David's comments about the learning. One of the things that I try to champion is the enabling or terminal learning objectives, and make it transformational learning so it's bite-sized. I don't necessarily have to have everybody on my team know everything I do. I need to make sure they know what they need to know to get the job done right then. And then hopefully I've got somebody behind them, or I'm behind them, that can handle the rest of it while they attend to whatever the critical need is at the path, in front of them. And then the last thing is that the need for flexibility. We can't view this as a blueprint, because if we take one bolt out, the whole thing can tumble. You've got to be flexible and go where the organization takes you. So I think the learning, and if you think this isn't about learning, you're wrong. This is all about learning. This is all about innovation, about cost savings and efficiencies, make the knowledge workers at the base level faster, smarter, and innovate off of each other. You have to understand the learning component of this. If it's not tied into a learning effort, then you're bound to fail. Thank you.
Well, like the others on this particular panel, I have not had an opportunity to review Doug's program in detail. I think the architecture of what he's portrayed is incredibly groundbreaking, and probably very foundational, the kind of things we want to think about. Based on the architectural model, it would appear to be sufficient for an initial discussion of modules or segments or courses. My question really would be, is it necessary? It may be sufficient, but I don't know if it's necessary. One of the pain points I run into in teaching in the MBA and BBA programs, in which I do teach knowledge management as well as executive leadership, is we have a number of learners who come through, and I mentioned this morning, without the equipment. They just don't have the basic capability. Some of them wash out from the MBA program very early on, and the BBA program. our retention rates are anywhere from 75% to 80%. So, in my experience with the Association for Information and Image Management, we developed a very large number. We get Muzak, this is great. We developed a large number, someone wanted to put background music to my words. We developed a number of information access, records management, content management modules, business process engineering, into a framework similar to this. One of the reasons I decided to disengage myself from the Educational Advisory Council after we rolled it out was we didn't flunk it. Everybody got through. So the credentialing value of the certificates that they achieved all had the same value, which was regretfully 0, even for those who had excelled at them. Now, from a certificate, degree level, we also have a number of people who just barely get through, but they get their master's in knowledge management. Total disasters in our workplace. So in relation to the model, because there are a few other questions we'll all be answering, I'd like to ask Doug what the retention rate is. How many people have flunked in each of those modules?
That's a very interesting question, and one that we've not yet resolved. We're looking for a mechanism that can truly test someone's capability in that so-called classroom environment. And we're leaning towards having a simulation at the end of the week that people have to either singly or in small groups go through and successfully pass. But in the classroom environment, you know, it's really hard to discern somebody's real mastery. One of the concepts that I have, that I've been employing for these many years, is that life is an open book exam. And on school systems, we mostly have the reverse of that, right? Close your book, take out your test paper and pencil, and take this test, and it's on recall. I don't think just asking somebody at the end of a certification exam, as many certification bodies do, true, false, multiple choice on 150 questions is any sense a measure of their real accomplishments and ability to perform. So I've taken a separate approach, which is we want to create a simulation, which would be a much better test of that, but also, parallel with that, give them a really robust body of knowledge during that course and that they take with them after that. So our methodology is very robust. There's some 580 activities in it, you know, well documented in the courseware and the other materials. So I believe that when a person graduates, they may at that moment not be an expert yet. They certainly need to go out and do some practical work, but the body of knowledge stands behind them as well, and so they can go back to that. So it's a tough question, how we're going to judge that. I don't think any school system yet knows the exact answer, but I lean much more towards the practicum type of, in fact, let me go back to the historical, and your wife Alex was involved in this decision back in 2000, 2001. When I first designed this program, it was meant to be a learning experience and a practicum. But when I went into the market in 2001, everybody in the woodwork was coming out of the woodwork teaching KM. And there was no way such a program could compete in the marketplace because it was going to be like a 3 to 6 month program, and it's not at the university. So I unbundled the two parts. And the one part was the learning part, which was a week-long workshop, and the other was the practicum. So you see Steve and Carla were the ones who went through the practicum phase. But to answer your original question, we don't know yet what the answer is on that. I think a simulation. There's something that's been recommended to me, and that's an end of course future scenario. That's the capstone project at the end of the week. Is everybody familiar with the term future scenario? It's almost self-obvious, right? Write a story. Gee, you like this one. Write a story about what your organization is going to look like 5 or 10 years from now. And if you've captured what you need to know about KM, you could probably write a pretty rich story about what it's going to be like. So I'm toying with those two, and maybe even both will be part of that.
Well, one of the things that I'm very concerned about when we do the credentialing, even at a degree level, at the university level, if the environment is not immersive and experiential, you've just indicated the problem we have with assessment. If it's an online course, digital page turner, talking head, PowerPoint slide, take a quiz, I mean, we all know the value of a University of Phoenix degree, okay? It has some value, there's no doubt, because some people do not have the time to put their butt in a seat and get a regular degree. So for them, it still permits them access to some learning. But if we again use David's neuroscience and the Kolbe model, or the Kolb model, experiential learning with reflection embeds 80% of the learning. So that would be my only constructive criticism. Right. The architecture is superb.
Well, thank you for that, but it's open so that we can enrich it over time, and that's the whole purpose of this kind of an architecture. But I want to bring one other example to the class, and you've heard me mention, I think on my webinar, or maybe even yesterday, that we're attempting to teach high schoolers KM. We need to be doing that. One state, a state near and dear to your heart, Ohio, has mandated that the high schoolers need to get KM education during the high school 4 years. You want to talk about a problem? You have teachers that don't know anything about KM who are going to try to teach students about something that they probably have a lot of technical facility with some of the social tools and whatnot, but they don't really know much about KM either. So where we're going on that is the teachers need to have a basic understanding. Something like, the chart isn't up there any longer, but something like the basic knowledge worker type of understanding of what the knowledge age is all about. So we teach the teachers just a bare minimum. We can't make certified knowledge managers out of them. They don't have the time to do that. That's not their focus. Their focus is in 4 or 5 other disciplines, not knowledge management. This is just something they need to teach and make sure they check the box. But we really want the students to learn. So the approach we're taking is the students themselves on DVDs, so you see some examples here, because the teacher is not capable of standing up in front of the class and delivering platform-rich experience in what KM is all about. So they use the aid, the teacher's aid of a DVD to teach the basic fundamentals of KM, but then the teachers facilitate projects, KM kinds of projects. Now the question is, what kinds of projects are appropriate for a high schooler? You can't get into some advanced business kinds of things, but all of you know what these knowledge cafes are and things like that. You can teach these kinds of techniques. You can teach them collaboration tools and techniques, but that's yet to be developed. What these projects will be, that's a challenge I throw out to everyone. I would love to see all 50 states have KM at the high school level, but we've got to solve the problem of how it's going to be delivered.